Welcome to the Hot Desk Podcast. This is a special edition, and I have Robert Kramer as my special guest host. Hi, Robert. How are
Hi,
you?
everyone. I'm great. Thank you for inviting me. This is going to be a really fun time. Thanks.
Great to have you. So, Robert is somewhat new to our team, not super new, about 9 months in, right?
Correct.
And we'll talk a little bit more about Robert in a bit. Robert, like all more insights and strategy analysts, has a very rich background in corporate leadership positions. And I'll brag on him a little bit so he doesn't have to brag on himself. He has very quickly made it on AR Insights top analyst in the world, currently sitting at number 5.
Thank you.
Amazing work, Robert. Anyway, on this show, we talk about all the tools, trends, and trajectories. We started about talking just about modern work, but that has really kind of spanned into what we call people tech, marketing technologies, and now we're going to add some data cloud, and we're going to give a little bit of a sneak peek about why Robert is going to be showing up more often. We actually may rename this pod. We may add some pods. We've got a lot of things coming up. This week, we are talking about Salesforce Trailblazer DX, IBM and Adobe Firefly, 8x8, and then our exciting new announcement. And I have to read this disclaimer. Normally, Pat does this. And by the way, Pat has been on the road filming 6.5 videos. And speaking of 6.5, that's launching in June. And registration is now open. So go to the 6.5 and 6.5.com and register for that. But this show is for information and entertainment purposes only. While we do discuss publicly traded companies on the show, contents of this show should not be taken as investment advice. All right. So given that, and I forgot, I need to change our little banner there. So this is what we're talking about. And now we will talk about Robert. So Robert is our VP and Principal Analyst of Enterprise Data and a bunch of other things. So Robert, why don't you give us just a little bit of background about yourself? And in the meantime, I did list all of your More Insight strategy, all of your research papers and the writings that you've done, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, and your Forbes on the show notes so people can go there. They can give you a follow. And I put up on the screen some of your recent research, including an article we wrote together on sustainability data. So anyway, give us a little background about yourself.
Thank you. Yep. So I've been with More Insights and Strategy about 9 months, but coming out of the workforce for about the last 30 years, was really heavily involved in marketing and data. So data intelligence relative to all my marketing efforts and data analytics. But I spent a lot of time also working with ERP vendors, specifically SAP, and handling a lot of their marketing campaigns globally. So it's really a natural step into the analyst role, and looking forward to making a lot of positive impact for the companies that we work for. So thank you very much for that intro.
Great. Well, we're very happy to have you. And it's really interesting when you kind of work in that world for so long and work with analysts, then being on the other side of it. It definitely is it's an easier transition when you've worked with analysts for so many years. So your most recent analyst event, you were at Salesforce TDX24, Trailblazer DX. Give me the full. There's a lot of.
There's a lot there. It was in San Francisco, and Salesforce has been around for a while. I think if everybody remembers them, they've probably been in business. I think they just had their 25th anniversary. So I was really excited to check them out and see what's going on, to learn a little bit more about the data cloud and what new features they have. And then they also released the Einstein 1 Studio and the Einstein for developers. So they had a lot of new things. But what I really wanted to see is how they're really handling data, because as it's the 25th anniversary, they were actually the first SaaS for CRM to apply the SaaS to a business function. And what's also really interesting is back 25 years ago, if you think of it, there was only really ERP systems. So the ERP systems really were the system of record and the source of truth, and really how we all handled looking at this different business functions. So I wanted to kind of see how they're getting the data out to all these different tools that they're using to be able to use the features and functionality of things like the data cloud.
Yeah, so I saw that they made the public beta announcement for Einstein Copilot, and they had that Turtle Bay, which is lovely, as the customer use case, pulling data across different sources from the data cloud, which, we did have. I saw somebody on one of your tweets make the comment that all clouds are data clouds. So it would be nice for you to kind of differentiate on why this data cloud kind of there's a little bit of a different story there. We can get to that.
Sure.
But from a CX perspective in CRM, this was really interesting to me, the Turtle Bay use case. It looks like they're like the personalization, case resolution, and everything. It was kind of like the dream use case in terms of how generative AI is used for CX. But in a lot of ways, when you see these kind of demos or customer cases, it's always the best case scenario. So is this the case? And if not, how do you get there?
That's a great question. And it really, when I did talk to a lot of the executives at Salesforce, the primary, concern was the data quality and getting the functionality out of the data cloud. So going back to that question, the data cloud, are they all created equal? They're not, because they all somewhat might do different things. But the specific one that we're talking about is Salesforce's data cloud, and they're really bringing enterprise data, which is the ERP, and business applications, which are other functions besides the ERP, into the data cloud to be able to be utilized and to have somewhat of a standardization to be able to use Salesforce with the great features that they have. But the problem is that if there's no data standardization, almost like a gold standard, that you can't get these features out. So if you're going back to like the Turtle Bay example, they're actually setting up their situation a little bit perfect. So they're able to tap that data cloud and actually get the resources out of there from a data perspective to have the proactive approaches of the customer interactions that they displayed. But, as I talk to some of my colleagues in marketing that have used Salesforce, and I specifically use Salesforce with SAP, part of the problem that we had is the data wasn't set up right to begin with through going back to the ERP. And that's part of the problem, is getting that data utilization to have a consistent standard. And most companies don't have a strategy for data management that they can put in and implement a gold standard to help the situation out. So in a perfect world, it does work. It does work great. But, we're going to be able to help people out with these strategies from a data perspective.
Yeah. Sounds like they do need to kind of get that help to get from that data foundation to that gold standard. And really, I think it's so much of it is about communicating that business value of that gold standard for the data cloud, right?
Yeah, and I agree. And when you look at these companies, they all want what we're talking about. But in some cases, you have to pay attention to the enterprise data, because that's really the anchor where everything started, but it's not going away. So that has to be corrected. The business data has to be, put together with that. And you have to have a standardized format for all these functions to work together. So we can help with the standardization, the tools, and the governance. And with that, a really strong data management strategy can be assembled. And that's what we do.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next topic, which is IBM generates Let's Create campaign with Adobe Firefly.
Which is a fantastic post that you did on LinkedIn. It looks like you've been following them for quite a while, and Adobe Firefly journey is really important to you. So tell us a little bit more.
I love this. First of all, we put it up on the screen. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And it's really interesting how all of this was created with generative AI in Adobe Firefly Image Creator. So like you said, I did a post on this on LinkedIn because I find this, having been a part of this journey from the very beginning, it's so interesting. Adobe originally announced Firefly at Adobe Summit last year, which is Adobe Summit is about to happen this year. But I was at Adobe Summit last year and I wrote about it. And then at Adobe Max, I spoke with their Matthew Perdon, who's their Senior Product Director of Creative Cloud. And we talked about all about the content supply chain in Gen Studio and just what the what marketers are having to go through in terms of the velocity of content that they need to produce. And
Mhm.
it's just so massive. And so IBM in this campaign created 200 assets and over 1,000 marketing variations for a campaign in a matter of minutes. So as a marketer, you understand this, that
Mhm.
could normally take months, right? So they used generative AI to do this. And I think what's really great about this is if you look at the evolution of Firefly from the first image model, it was very simple and it wasn't, really super advanced. You could ask it to create something and it would maybe have some weird things sticking out or whatever. I mean, you could make some pretty simple things, but when when they came out with Firefly 2, it had some really, really intelligent tweaks to it for creatives. And so it wasn't just it created the image for you. The creatives could actually have control of the image, make those changes to it. And so it wasn't like this thing was just generating it for you. They were part of the creative process.
Mm.
So where I think initially creatives within a company, within a marketing team or a creative team, or even at an ad agency felt like these types of tools were for non-creatives, Firefly has really made it, even in their photo editing tools, made it so that people can really put their own creative spin on these images and make it part of a really creative process, not just an image generating process. So I really loved seeing this just kind of from start to finish. I'm sure it's nowhere near finished. They've got a lot of work to do still. But one of the things when I was at Max, I asked one of their CTOs what happened, how did they get from Firefly 1 to Firefly 2, having so many of these tweaks where people can really be part of this creative process. And I asked, is it you that got smarter or was it the model that got smarter? And he said both. And I love that answer because
Good
I
answer.
really it's Adobe saying, we don't want this just to be for non-creatives. We really want the creative community to be a part of this process, to be able to create faster, to kind of answer to the issues that they have in their job functions, but still feel like they're really putting their own style, their own stamp on these things. And I think that they've done that. And this is a great use case with IBM that they've been able to do this. And I think it's gorgeous. I could talk about it forever. So we should move on to the next thing, which is the last event that I was at, which was the 8x8 Analyst. I'm going to take this IBM thing off. So
It was in San Diego. You got a chance to go to the zoo again.
I did. I was at the zoo.
Always fun. How did it go?
It was good. So I was trying to think of a way to wrap up everything that so this was an analyst only event, which is different than when you have customers there and everything, because so much of it is public. In an analyst event, we really do get to see kind of a lot of the inside workings of a company, but sometimes a lot of it is under NDA. So I was trying to think of, how do I summarize this event? I want to write a research note, do something, something where I summarize this. And my thoughts were like, okay, well, should it be my 8 takeaways from the 8x8 event? I like to write something clever. But I think probably at least 5 of the things were under NDA. So I think, my big takeaways were the company is I think their message is that they're customer obsessed. And I saw that to be true within the company culture, within the way that I think that always starts with employees. We've talked about this before.
Absolutely.
And so I think for 8x8, for me, what I witnessed with them is it starts with employees, and it starts with their employees. So their internal team, their internal culture is very much like employee focused and culture obsessed, which is going to translate to customer obsessed, which is going to translate to their customers being, customer obsessed and employee obsessed. I think it's sort of that that trickle effect that that maintains that customer focus. And I saw that to be true sort of internally. And I really think that what they do on kind of differentiating on the end state is important. They don't always say use all of our products, and that's kind of that's a confident approach for a company to take, to say it's okay if you like that product better, plug us in here, because we want you to have the best of breed. And however you do this, what we want is the end state to be great. And however you fit us into that, we're going to be your partner on that. And that keeps their retention really high. So those were my takeovers that aren't under NDA.
Well, it's important though that you said about the employees, because they are the biggest asset, and you want to empower your biggest asset to be successful, and that's where you start, is at the employees. Exactly what you're talking about. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. And especially when you talk about the contact center. For a really long time, when people were talking about employee experience, people were differentiating between employees and agents, like as if agents weren't employees. They may be classified different from an HCM, like categorization type in some ways, but they should be treated as employees, and they're just as important, if not sometimes more important, because they are the front line to your customer. And I think that the way that 8x8 approaches them, and I see this, I just actually recently had a briefing with Verint. They very much focus on, I see this with Avaya, I see it with RingCentral, I see it with a lot of different vendors, where the focus on the agent is very much on the agent experience. It hasn't always been like that, but it very much is now. And I think that's a very important focus right now, because that is your tie to your customer. And of course, there's going to be some AI that's going to come in there and do some of those jobs. That's great, because that's going to free up those people to do kind of the more high touch, the more important stuff, and it's going to free them to do that stuff better. But those frontline agents are so important, and they have to be treated as such. Can you imagine how hard that job is?
Difficult.
People don't call up because they love that. I don't call Yeti because I love my Yeti cup. Thank you so much for making this.
Right.
I call
the negative.
The thing broke off, or I don't call it for that, but people do. So the reason why they had this event at the zoo is because the zoo uses 8x8's contact center, and the zoo, they had that was kind of one of their customer, they did a customer panel, and that was one of their customer examples. And the woman there who manages their contact center, well, she was telling me some great stories about the people who call in. Imagine the animal lovers who call in, and sometimes they just want to call in and chat. Like the chimpanzee Nancy. Well, if she was eating, this branch, and she didn't think she liked that branch, and she wants to talk about it. Imagine the people who call into call centers and the types of things that they have to think about. We could do a whole podcast on call centers, honestly. But let's get on to our big announcement and all of the fun things we have to come. And I will let you kick this one off, because I feel like I've been talking and talking.
Well, we're going to roll out a new category. This is pretty cool. And it's called sports technology. And it really came about, the two of us have been talking for quite a while. And it really started with the trip that I took to Manchester, UK. But it was, how does technology influence sports? Back in the day when we were all growing up, sponsorships for sports were just more like a logo. But as we're seeing it today, technology is transforming sports, and these global brands are doing more than just a sponsorship for the logo. They're doing a sponsorship for their technology. So it's affecting the IT company who's doing the sponsorship with their technology, the sporting brand itself, and then the fans. And when I went over to Manchester United, I really got to see that firsthand, where Qualcomm is going to be sponsoring Manchester United Football Club, but the fans are going to get something out of this. Qualcomm's going to get something out of this, and so is Manchester U. So it's really cool. And so I'm really excited to kick it off with you. And we're going to have a series of things on advisory and an analysis of real sports technology.
And a podcast. And also, speaking of your trip to Man U and Snapdragon, and it's funny, I just brought up my Yeti cup. This is a Snapdragon Yeti. I love this my Yeti. It keeps my coffee hot forever. But yeah, like you said, I think it really is this interesting evolution of how brands communicate their technology through these sports sponsorships. It's no longer just slapping a logo on something. I mean, right here we're slapping a logo on a Yeti cup, but this is more just a thank you for being there, right? It's like,
Right.
you go to Salesforce. Did they give you any swag?
Not yet.
Oh my gosh, they should send you
Waiting for it.
Right? Like, I love, I mean, sometimes you don't want to carry things home, but at the same time, this is nice. But I think, like, you talked about how sponsorships used to be. Like, sometimes they would come up with clever ones. One of the things that I always refer back to is like the Gap, the clothing brand.
Mm-hmm.
They used to sponsor in baseball fields that part of the baseball field that's called the Gap, and they would put their logo in that part of the field. Well, that makes sense because there's some tie to it, right? So that's clever, but it's not showcasing any technology. They're not using their brand, their clothing or anything. But when you can, like, for instance, Ring Central has a partnership with the Warriors. So they use their communications platform from like the box to the field to their call centers, that people calling in to talk about, there's the communications platform is being used. They actually had Steve Kerr as a guest on one of their analyst events, which was really cool. But in so many ways, we're seeing this, like telecom companies where they're using 5G in the stadiums. I hate being in a stadium and not being able to like text and really it's to their detriment, because you're in a stadium and you want to like post to social media that you just saw this thing happen or whatever. They're missing out on so much of this fan experience outside of the stadium because people can't get through. There's a lot of things that are happening that the technology is being used, but people aren't necessarily aware of it. And I feel like, it's such an opportunity for companies to showcase the technology beyond just having a suite in a stadium. Correct. I love the way like Zoom uses their contact center for for MLB for the replay. Like when I first saw, we watch a lot of baseball around here. I'm a baseball mom. And when I first saw Zoom ads on MLB, I was like, why Zoom? I wonder why they'd be advertising on that. And then I put together that they're using that for the MLB replay center. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the video capability of Zoom to be able to zoom in on that replay so that they can see it with like definitively see if that runner got his foot on base, and they can communicate that all the way back to New York. They're showcasing the quality of their technology. This is not just hey, we're sponsoring this. Hey, we're going to have our sales guys bring potential customers to a suite. It shows the value on so many levels, right? I mean, when you show that value, you can get the CFO to approve that a whole lot easier. Just to be like, our sales guys need a place to make a sale. This really demonstrates the technology. I mean,
it's amazing.
8 million examples that we can give right now, but really exciting time to be in sports. I think just from a why us perspective, let's give a little background about your sports background, Robert.
Well, that's a great question. So I think what we're going to be able to showcase to companies is to promote what they're doing from a sponsorship beyond the standard sponsorship of the logos, to show how they're handling automated sponsorships versus the manual, because these sporting companies are not manually involved from a management anymore. They're using all these different technologies. So I've been in sports my whole life, and like you said, it's phenomenal to be involved. So when I worked at one of the previous companies, we handled all the Olympic committee things for putting all those sports programs together and the technology that was associated, and then gathered all the analytics necessary to come to some conclusions. So that was a big play. I'm a former tennis player as well, and hockey player, and my son was a Division I golfer. So I've been involved in all the different analytics. How do we make him better at golf? What different tools are available from a performance standpoint? And that's part of this as well. The technologies of sports is down to the player's performance and how coaches utilize different players from a physical perspective, their health,
Absolutely.
and then what time of the game do they go in, all the way down to the analytics for Formula One. I think that's the actual game of inches, using the data analytics. So all of our sponsorships that we actually use, that we're partnered with already, like SAP for Formula One, Software AG as well, the companies that you mentioned. It goes on and on, for a laundry list, but we're going to be able to showcase this through this program and how these companies are utilizing technology in sports, and make sure the world is understanding why they're doing it and how the dividend is there for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, when you talk about like even being able to measure these really tiny things, I saw something about swimming, and even just like a half of a degree in temperature changes the way that a swimmer performs, because they have to
Amazing.
adjust their caloric intake because the temperature will burn more calories. I mean, the technology that is available. But yeah, I think, your background in sports. I'm a former CMO. I did a lot of sponsorships with sports, with NASCAR, with Red Bull, with a number of different brands. So I've had to kind of both justify and activate all of these types of sponsorships. I am also a former cheerleading coach, which you would probably be hard to believe if I gave you like a,
I'm not, but
one of those like two truths and a lie thing. I always joke like one would be like, I was raised in the circus. I was a cheerleading coach, and I have 7 kids. Which one's a lie? They're all true.
oh my God. And you're a huge baseball fan, like you said before, so you have an
Yes,
enormous amount of experience with
I
that.
am a travel baseball mom. I am a former Pop Warner board member, and the technology is amazing. I just seeing the technology that my kids use for pitching, for batting, for all of the things, and how much of a performance lift that you can get even from those little things is it's incredible. So and they're still high school age. So when they get to those higher levels, even from a recruiting standpoint, I mean the technologies that are used now are
Oh, it's
really
huge.
incredible. So we are getting to our time here, but we've got a lot more to talk about on that. Very excited for that. We'll probably kick off next week on that with some
Can't wait.
really exciting things to talk about. Well, Robert, it was really great to have you as a guest, and
Thank you.
probably from now on, no longer a guest. We're going to just kick this off and get this moving. And like I said from the beginning, Robert's Twitter, LinkedIn, everything is posted in the show notes. If you like what you saw here, which I hope you did, give us a follow. If you have any feedback, hit us both up on Twitter. If there's anything you'd like to hear about on any upcoming podcasts, just shoot us a note and we'll see if we can talk about it. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.